And because we had a walk as well.
What?
We had a walk as well. So
Yeah, I
when
thought
I'm
it was
feeling
just my imagination. But actually, it is quite warm in here.
we cool it down a little bit.
No, it's all right. And everyone has jackets on, too. It's unbelievable. I guess because we walked.
Yes.
Just like that. We heated up. All right, streaming. Ready to go. Jaya, Jaya, Radha Madhuva, Kunja Bihari.
Jaya
Radha Madhuva, Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radhu Madhuva, Kunja Bihari. Janababa, Iri Badatale,
Gopi Janababa, Nirvaranari.
Gopi Janababa, Iri Badatale,
Gopi Janababa, Nirvaranari.
Yasodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana,
Sudanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana.
Sudanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana,
Sudanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana.
Jamuna Tira Panachare,
Tira Vanachari.
Yamuna Tira Panachare,
Tira Vanachari.
Jaya Radhu Madhava, Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janababa, Gopi
Paramahansa Paravidikacharya Usuteta Sutashi Shimad. His Divine Grace Abhaya Chananala Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Sri Vasudhi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Sai Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai. Maturanam Ki Jai. Jagannath Swami Ki Jai. Manamai Ki Jai. Srimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Pudale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namadi Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharni Nivishesha Shanyavadi Pashacha Dejatarni. Can I have a little water?
Just one water?
Pani. Okay, so today we are continuing with our description of Lord Ramachandra's pastimes. Well, we start with reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, as is the tradition. So we're going to read the next verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Those of you who have devices, which is everybody. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th Canto, 10th chapter, text 3. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Okay. Tashanu Charatang
Tasyam Charitam
Rajan
Rajan
Rishives
Shives
Tattva
Tattva
Darshivi
Darshivi
Shrutang
Shutam
Hi Varnatang
Varitam
Puri
Puri
Vaya
Vaya
Sita
Sita
Pater
Pater
Muhu.
Muhu.
Thank you. Tasyanu Charitam Rajan
Tasyam Charitam Rajan
Rishivis Tattva-darshivi
Shivis Tattva-darshivi
Shrutam hi varnatam bhuri
Sutamivarnitam Bhuri
Vayasita pater muhu
Rasita Patemuhu
Tasyanu charitam rajan
Tasyam Charitam Rajan
Rishivis Tattva-darshivi
Shivis Tattva-darshivi
Shrutam hi varnatam bhuri
Sutamivarnitam Bhuri
Vayasita pater muhu
Rasita Patemuhu
Tasyanu charitam rajan
Tasyam Charitam Rajan
Rishivis Tattva-darshivi
Shivis Tattva-darshivi
Shrutam hi varnatam bhuri
Sutamivarnitam Bhuri
Vayasita pater muhu.
Rasita Patemuhu
Okay.
Tasya anucharitam rajan
Tasyanucharitam Rajan
Shibhi tattva darshavi
Shivis Tattva-darshivi
Sutam hi varnitam bhuri
Srutam hi varnitam Bhuri
Vaya sita pate muhu
Maya Sita Patemuhu
तस्यानुचरितं राजन्
तस्यानुचरितं राजन्
ऋषिभिस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः
ऋषिभिस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः
श्रुतं हि वर्णितं भूरि
श्रुतं हि वर्णितं भूरि
त्वया सीतापतेर्मुहुः
त्वया
सीतापतेर्मुहुः
तस्यानुचरितं राजन्
तस्यानुचरितं राजन्
ऋषिभिस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः
ऋषिभिस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः
श्रुतां हि वर्णितां भूरि
श्रुतं हि वर्णितं भूरि
त्वया सीतापतेर्मुहुः
त्वया सीतापतेर्मुहुः
तस्यानुचरितं राजन्
तस्यानुचरितं राजन्
ऋषिभिस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः
ऋषिभिस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः
श्रुतं हि वर्णितं भूरि
श्रुतं हि वर्णितं भूरि
त्वया सीतापतेर्मुहुः
त्वया सीतापतेर्मुहुः
All right. Tasya,
Tasya,
of him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
of him the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
Lord Ramachandra and his brothers,
Lord Ramchandra and his brothers,
Anucharitam,
Anucharitam,
transcendental activities.
transcendental activities.
Rajan,
Rajan,
O King Maharaja Parikshit,
O King Maharaj Parikshit,
Rishibi,
Rishibi,
by the great sages or saintly persons,
by great sages of saintly persons,
Tattvadarshibhi,
Tattvadarshibhi,
by persons who know the absolute truth,
by persons who know absolute truth,
Shutam,
Shutam,
have all been heard.
have all been heard.
He, indeed,
Indeed,
Varnitam,
Varnitam,
as they have been so nicely described.
as they have been so nicely described.
Buri,
Buri,
many.
many,
Twaya,
Twaya,
by you.
by you,
Sitapate,
Sitapate,
of Lord Ramachandra,
of Lord Ramchandra,
the husband of Mother
the
Sita.
husband of Mother Sita,
Muhu, more than often.
more than often.
So translation. O King Parikshit, the transcendental activities of Lord Ramachandra have been described by great saintly persons who have seen the truth. Because you have heard again and again about Lord Ramachandra, the husband of Mother Sita, I shall describe these activities only in brief. Please listen. So, purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This is very heavy purport. Modern Rakshasas, posing as educationally advanced merely because they have doctorates, have tried to prove that Lord Ramchandra is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but an ordinary person. But those who are learned and spiritually advanced will never accept such notions. They will accept the descriptions of Lord Ramchandra and his activities only as presented by the Tattvadarshis, those who know the absolute truth. In Bhagavad Gita, in the 4th chapter, text 34, the Supreme Personality of Godhead advises Tadvini Prani Patena Paripashnena Sevaya Upadekshanti Te Jnana Ganinas Tattva Darshana. Just try to learn the truth by approaching the spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. Unless one is Tattvadarshi, in complete knowledge of the absolute truth, one cannot describe the activities of the personality of Godhead. Therefore, this is where it gets a little heavy for some of you. Although there are many so-called Ramayanas, or histories of Lord Ramchandra's activities, some of them are not actually authoritative. Sometimes Lord Ramchandra's activities are described in terms of one's own imaginations, speculations, or material sentiments. It's pretty much a direct reference to something.
Yeah.
But Prabhupada doesn't directly say, because, The way Prabhupada would deal with philosophical differences with someone, generally he wouldn't mention anyone by name. He would just make the philosophical point. Just like yesterday we made a philosophical point that you probably shouldn't hear from someone who's been rejected by his guru or someone, anyway, who neglects other aspects of Krishna consciousness. But the characteristics of Lord Ramachandra should not be handled as something imaginary. While describing the history of Lord Ramachandra, Shukadeva Goswami told Maharaj Pariksit, "You've already heard about the activities of Lord Ramachandra. Apparently, therefore, 5,000 years ago, there were many Ramayanas, or histories of Lord Ramachandra's activities, and there are many still, but we must select only those books written by Tattvadarshis. Jnaninas Tattvadarshanaha." Gita, 4th chapter, text 34. Not the books of so-called scholars who claim knowledge only on the basis of a doctorate. This is a warning by Shukadeva Goswami, Rishibhis Tattvadarshibhi. Although the Ramayana composed by Valmiki is a huge literature, the same activities are summarized here by Shukadeva Goswami in a few verses. And again, the verse. Tashanu charitam rajam rishibhis tattvadarshibhi shutam hivarnitam bhuri toya sita pater muhu. So Om Gala Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shi Gurave Namaha. So, of course, before we go on to the characters in the Ramayana we were going to speak about, or we are going to speak about, we should talk about what the philosophical point that Prabhupada made in this particular verse. And I'm not going to make reference to anyone's particular Ramayana that they're attached to. However, the word or phrase Tattvadarshi is actually very important. It doesn't literally mean to see with the eyes the truth. It means, because the word Tattva really means that which is, that tat, mean that, twa, which indicates the, as we mentioned many times before, the different categories of the Lord and his energies. That's what tattva means. To understand the difference between the soul, the individual soul, Supreme Personality of Godhead, the material energy, and the spiritual energy. These are the tattvas, as we cited this verse the other day. Vishnu Shakti Para, Prakta Shitrakya Tatav Para, Avidya Karma Santrir Shakti Ishate. The Lord has three Shaktis, material energy, spiritual energy, and the Jiva soul. And then apart from that, there's Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is not a Shakti, he's Shakti Mam. So one has to know the differences and how they interact with each other, relationship with each other. That is called Sambandha Gyan. Got it? The three aspects of our advancement in devotional service, Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. Sambandha means to know the differences, and the Bhagavad Gita deals with these different tattvas and the relationship between the different tattvas. That's what Tattvadarshi means. However, if one has a Mayavad tendency, which Srila Prabhupada commented concerning one particular Ramayana, or the author of a particular Ramayana, then that person doesn't know the tattvas. Simple as that. So it doesn't mean one sees Krishna face to face. but one knows the difference and the interactions and the relationship between the different tattvas. So Mayavad philosophy means that you're confusing the Supreme Personality Godhead with an ordinary person, or you're thinking he takes a material body. I mean, there's different types of Mayavad or impersonalistic or improper understandings of the tattvas, or thinking that an individual such as you or me could become God. These are different, anyway, I don't know the Sanskrit word, but these are different misunderstandings of the tattvas. And so therefore, if someone is not Tarshabhi, and one hears from such a person, then it can be dangerous for one's spiritual life. Because if there's some subtle Mayavadi influence, you may say it's just subtle, it's just the Lord's pastimes. So one has to be very careful who one hears Krishna's pastimes or Lord Ramchandra's pastimes from. And this is the point Prabhupada is making in the purport. So now we'll talk about Lord Ramchandra's pastimes, which come primarily, of course, the Bhagavatam makes some summary study of Lord Ramchandra's pastimes, which come primarily from Valmiki Muni. Now, I guess we should talk about Valmiki Muni, how he became a Tattvadarshi. Because Valmiki Muni was not always Valmiki Muni. It's different versions of the Ramayana, it gives different names, but the name in the Valmiki Ramayana is Ratnagara. He was actually born in a Brahmin family, but he became degraded. He became degraded because of his desire to acquire wealth. A real Brahmin is yajan, patan, dana pratigraha. He teaches how to perform sacrifice. He does sacrifices. He gives charity, accepts charity, gives instruction, takes instruction, and then he subsists on whatever charity people give. And if people give too much charity, what does he do? Gives it away. Like there was this big sacrifice one time described in the Bhagavatam, also in the Ramayana, where, actually in the Mahabharata too, where this king, I believe his name was Marut or something, he was performing a big sacrifice and he gave the Brahmanas tons and tons of gold. Now for most of us, tons of gold, I mean, there's even some stories about some people had tons of gold and they had to cross a river and they drowned because they were so attached to the tons of gold. So most of us, wow, tons of gold. How much does gold sell for an ounce now?
The ladies there.
So it's 10 grams is 1 lakh, which is $2,000.
$190 per gram.
So you ladies would like to donate your jewelry
We already have
to a poor sannyasi? So anyway, joking aside. So these brahmanas just left all the gold. They were real brahmanas. They just left all the gold. So then later, when Yudhisthira Maharaj had to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice and the Ashwamedha sacrifice after the battle of Kurukshetra, there was no money left. Absolutely no money. And because of that, he sent Arjuna out, Dhananjaya, he who collects wealth. And Arjuna got the wealth from there. I believe it was Vyasadeva who told him where to find the wealth. In the Mahabharata mentions that. So anyway, but that's a real Brahman. So this Ratnagara, he didn't have the right Brahminical consciousness. And so he became a dacoit, as all of you know. And in the Valmiki Ramayana, it mentions he stopped the Sapta Rishis. I don't know what it says in the Tulsidas Ramayana. But Valmiki Ramayana says the Sapta Rishis, the 7 Rishis. Yeah, 7 Rishis. Like Vasishta, like that, and Vishramita. I don't know what they were doing walking through the forest. Because these Rishis could fly through the air. But anyway, they were walking through the forest. So this is their plan. And he stopped them and he said, give me your money. Of course, the rishis didn't have too much money with them. And so then the rishi said, don't you understand, this is very, very sinful. And he said, I know, because, I'm a Brahmin. I knew these things before, but I have needs. My wife is just begging for saris. My son is just begging for an iPhone, I'm just making it funny like that. It's just like, sometimes you see, like little birds, there's a mother bird that comes to the baby birds to feed them, and they're all sometimes it's like that, Like Prabhupada, oh my God, I don't know if I should say this, but Prabhupada said one time, if one's not careful, the family members become legal thieves. Legal thieves?
Yeah.
So what is that?
Legal thieves.
Legal thieves.
They can steal from,
Yeah.
Within family.
just like when I was young, my father would come home from work, I'd take his pants and turn them upside down. So anyway, his family members really had so many desires. So the Saptarishi said, why don't you check with your family members to see if they're willing to take your bad karma? Because he understood about the bad karma. He was educated. Just like Ravana was an educated Brahmin. Not Brahmin, but educated in Brahminical activities. So he went back to his family members, to make a long story short, and he asked each one of them, will you take part of my sinful reaction karma? And they said, no, Dad. You're supposed to work, we're supposed to enjoy. And so he goes back to the Saptarishis, and the Saptarishis he tells the Saptarishis what his family member said, and he said, I'm very discouraged, I don't want to work for these guys anymore. And what should I do? And we know that Saptarishis gave him this mantra, Mara, 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 because he couldn't chant Ram Ram. He was too sinful.
Ram, 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 Ram.
Yeah, it became Ram Ram Ram. It's a famous story. And he chanted it, and he was so determined in chanting the mantra that an anthill grew around him. That's why he's called Valmiki. And so later on, the Saptarishis came back, and they saw this anthill was chanting Ram's name. And they revived him through some celestial water or something like that. And he came out, and then they instructed him, you should write about the pastimes of Lord Ram. At that time, there was no poetry, because as we know, the Ramayana is actually an epic poem. It's basically all written in the same meter, which is really remarkable. Long meter means meter, anyway. So what happened, the Valmiki Ramayana describes, I don't know if it's in the other Ramayans, that he saw a low-class man killing a bird while the birds were mating or something like that. And he cursed this low-class man. And he cursed the low-class man in poetic form, the first poetry. It's described, the Valmiki Ramayana, this is the origin of poetry, at least in that particular kalpa. And so he thought, well, this is wonderful. Poetry. And later on, he was advised by Narada Muni and also Lord Brahma to compose the pastimes of Lord Ram. And because he chanted Ram's name, which is non-different than Hare Krishna, he was so purified he was able to envision the pastimes of Lord Ram within his heart. Prabhupada describes in the Srimad Bhagavatam that a pure devotee has spiritual television. That means, nowadays we say he can Google anything. Spiritual, online. We use a different expression because I don't know if I've seen a television in a long time, but anyway. So he was able to see these pastimes, and he composed the Ramayana, and he became such a great devotee, he was able to host Sita Devi later on when she was in exile, sent away by Lord Ramchandra, and also train up Lav and Kush, and also teach Lav and Kush the Ramayana, So later on, Lava and Kush were able to recite the Ramayana before Lord Ramchandra. Yeah, so that is the author of the Ramayana. So that's the quality or the qualification. Anyone can become qualified if they understand the tattva. Simple as that. That's what tattvadarshi means, to understand the tattva. It doesn't necessarily mean to see the tattva. So now we're going to go through a brief list. Actually, it's not such a brief list of the different characters in the Ramayana. This is one of my favorite lists. And also, at the end of the list, we're going to go through a list of the some of the different places in the Ramayana. So we have this file here. So, beginning with A. That's how you begin lists. So, the first person on the list is interesting. It's Ahalya,
Ahalya.
who's the wife of Gautama Rishi.
She became stone.
When the Valmiki Ramayana, she became disincarnate. Because Indra... Yeah, so that's the difference between Valmiki and some other Ramayans.
Yeah.
That, in some other Ramayans, and even the movie, she became a stone.
Yeah.
But what happened is that, whoops, symptom of ecstasy. Indra is really lusty, and that's why he has all these eyes on his body. I won't describe why, but anyway, he's a really lusty guy. I don't want to offend him, but, he does have that issue. And so, she was very attractive. And he thought, I want to have a relationship with her. So, one thing led to another, and her husband, Gautama Rishi, went to bathe himself in the river. Indra took the form of Gautama Rishi and went into Ahalya and said, "Hi, I'm here." She was also culpable because she understood. I mean, a lady can understand the difference between her husband and Indra, isn't it? Just like that story, the Tulsidas, not Tulsidas, but Tulsi Devi with Shankachuda. When Shankachuda left to go on a battle, and Lord Vishnu took the form of Shankachuda, she understood, and that's why she cursed him. But you don't find Ahalya cursing Indra, right? So she,
Understood.
so she wasn't cursed for no reason whatsoever. She had violated her chastity. So sometimes people criticize Gautama Rishi and said, "You lost it, buddy. It's not your wife's fault." But she did have some fault.
Yeah.
She understood it was Indra. Otherwise, she would have cursed Indra before Gautama Rishi cursed Indra. And the power of a chaste lady is more powerful than a rishi. So what happens is that Indra has a relationship in the form of Gautama Rishi with Ahalya. Then the real Gautama Rishi comes back and he sees himself, mirror image of himself. He says, something's coming out of his house. Then he understands it's Indra. And he curses Indra to become a eunuch, basically. And then Indra has to have a transplant from a goat or something like that. Just like, actually Prabhupada mentioned that story. He said just like many years ago when Prabhupada was on the planet, they would capture monkeys in Vrindavan and take their male glands off of the monkeys for rich people around the world to transplant them because the rich people wanted to have more lust. That was before they invented Viagra. You understand? And Prabhupada said, very funny the way Prabhupada explained it. He says they were taking the gland from one monkey and transplanting it to another monkey. Monkey in a human body, of course. So anyway, so Indra was cursed and Ahalya was also cursed. Gautama Rishi just took some water and just threw it on the ground, and Ahalya became disincarnate. Disincarnate is different than a stone. Disincarnate means to be like a ghost. Carnate. Carnate. It's just like the word in Latin, carnate. It means meat or flesh. So disincarnate means to lose the flesh, to lose the body, the physical body. So she was a ghost. And therefore, Lord Ram came later on and freed her from that ghostly body. And she joined her husband after suffering for some period of time. But she actually got the benediction to see Lord Ram, and got the benediction of his lotus feet, right? So you see, his curse was actually not only purifying for her offense, but also purified her to have the association of Lord Ram, like Narada Muni cursed Manigriva Nalakuvara. So that's Ahalya. Of course, it would take forever to go through this list. B for Bart. I'm not going to tell a little story about, well, I guess I should tell something. So, of course, Bart is the brother of Ram. And his mother made some mistakes, but that was a pastime. Kaikeyi. So anyway, so he was so loyal to Ram, there's a few words about it, that he wanted to bring Ram back and take Ram's place in the forest, but Ram refused. Ram sent him back, and Bart was so loyal and devoted to Ram that he, instead of becoming the king directly, he actually made Ram's Padukas the king. And he lived under the earth so that he would not be sleeping or living in a higher position than Lord Ram, who was sleeping on the earth. So dedicated. And he also just ate fruits for the 14 years. He just ate fruits and roots like Ram was eating. Pretty interesting, isn't it? And so he communicated with the citizens of Ayodhya because he was in this place called Nandigram. It wasn't the same Nandagram in Vrindavan or Braj, but he communicated through his brother Shatrughna. And, oh yeah, another thing is he actually rejected his mother in the beginning. He said, "You're not my mother anymore." And later on, Ram said, no. You can't consider your mother to be your enemy. And he reluctantly accepted her back. But, there was always a little anger towards his mother until the very, very end. Even though Ram said it was just like, he was so devoted to Ram that his devotion superseded his devotion to whatever devotion he could have had towards his mother. So that shows that these devotees were not nepotistic. They actually are simply focused on Ram. Next one in the list, we won't get through the whole list, is Dasharath. And Dasharath, of course, means he could fight in either 10 directions or with 10 Raths. So anyway, so that's what Dasharath means. And of course, we mentioned the family history the other day. It's in Vivaswan, the Sun Dynasty, and he was famous. He actually worked for the demigods at one particular juncture and helped defeat the demons on the part of the demigods. And he was completely devoted to Ram. And as we know, he inadvertently killed a rishi who was taking care of his parents. And as a result, he was cursed by the parents, the blind parents of the rishi, to die feeling separation from his son. And so it's a very sad story, but actually there's another philosophical explanation of it, which I'm not going to give today, that he died feeling separation from Lord Ram. And he actually rejected Kaikeyi as his wife. But basically he was controlled to a certain extent up to a point before he rejected her by Kaikeyi, because when he got married to Kaikeyi, he actually had promised her father that her son would become the next king. Because at that time, he didn't have any other children, because all the children were born pretty much at the same time. So he had that promise, and he made another promise to Kaikeyi, because Kaikeyi actually saved him one time when there was a battle. She took him off the battlefield. It shows the ladies actually knew how to fight in those days. I mean, they were Kshatriya ladies. It's not that all ladies are the same, like all men are not the same. So she took him off the battlefield, and he said, I'm so happy with you, I'll grant you some wishes. And those wishes were later on utilized to banish Lord Ram. So, anyway, she was, and we're not going to get to her. I shouldn't talk about her right now because she's later on in the list. But anyway, he was controlled by her when she threw a fit and got really angry. And he promised her again when she was actually lying down in the angry room of the palace, I'm going to give you whatever you want. You know, it was an act. She was crying. Ooh. And he said, whatever you want, I'll give you. Please stop crying. Because actually, Prabhupada said that a woman's greatest weapon are tears.
Tears.
Yeah, the Ramayana is very instructive in that regard. You know, because the men, they're just like, oh my God, this is worse than torture, you know. You know, because the men ask it's actually interesting, I've seen this again and again, and the ladies crying, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. And he asks, what's the problem, dear? And she says, you'll never understand. You've seen that before? Yeah. You'll never, and he says, please tell me. And the guy's in complete anxiety. You know, oh my God. And finally, he says, oh, whatever you want, I'll give you. All right, send Ram to the forest. You know, so Dasaraj was definitely, well, Kaikeyi was actually the youngest. So he was controlled by her. Something similar to the Dhruva Maharaj story, isn't it? Where you have Suniti and Suruchi. But that's very interesting. Uttanapada, you know, favored his youngest wife. And that's why it's good to only have one wife. So, and then another D is Dashahanan. And of course that's 10-headed Ravan. And I don't know if we need to talk more about Ravan. But, you know, he's an important character in the Ramayana. Actually, the word Ravan means someone who makes people cry.
Yes.
So imagine, what's your name? I make people cry. And the next personality, oh my God, we're only on the fifth personality, is Garuda. He's, of course, Vishnu's carrier. And he saved Ram and Lakshman when they had the snake weapon. It was fired by Indrajit. And there was no cure for the snake weapon. You know, they were enwrapped by snakes. And Garuda came and he just had some lunch. You know, they were, it's described in the Valmiki Run, they were the sons of Kadru. Kadru, of course, is the mother of the snakes. And her sister is Vinata. Vinata is the mother of Garuda. So these brothers, you know, half-brothers, have some trouble with their relationships. There's a whole story in the Mahabharata about that. So that's Garuda. Next is Gautama Rishi. And we already told the story of Ahalya, so we don't have to talk about Gautama Rishi. And the next, you get to H. Guess who that is? Hanuman. I guess you haven't read the Ramayana. So, the whole story of Hanuman, he's described as the, let's say, Anga of Lord Shiva. And there was basically the description is there was an embryo transplant from Lord Shiva and Parvati, and that embryo was carried by Vayu, isn't it, to Anjani. You know, she just felt something, and then all of a sudden the embryo was there. And then she gave birth to Hanuman, and Hanuman, of course, as soon as he was born, actually she went back to the heavenly planets as soon as he was born, the mother,
Oh.
according to the Ramayana. Because she was actually a demigoddess before who was serving Brahaspati. You heard this story?
Yeah, you told us.
I think I told the story
Yeah.
before. And she had seen some Gandharvas engage in lusty affairs, and she became lusty, and she began to kiss Brahaspati. Even though she wasn't married to Brahaspati, she became, just agitated and attracted to Brahaspati. And Brahaspati said, basically, you're acting like a monkey, so you should become a monkey. And so that's Hanuman's mother. And she begged for forgiveness, and she said, he said, okay, as soon as you give birth,
Don't come back.
you can go back, or come back. And that's what happened. And then, of course, Hanuman didn't have much to eat at that particular point, so then at one particular juncture, he runs or flies after the sun, because she says, eat some nice, round, juicy, red stuff. And so he goes after the sun, and at the same time, this is an interesting story, Rahu also wants to go after the sun because that's his business. So Rahu is frustrated in his attempt. Then he goes to Indra to complain, I'm not getting my food or whatever. I'm not getting able to perform the service I'm supposed to perform. And Indra likes to keep a balance in the universe, even though Rahu is a demon. He says, all right, I'm going to go attack this guy. So he fires his Vajra, his thunderbolt, at Hanuman. Hanuman is hit on the jaw, falls to the ground, and everyone is thinking he's dead.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that Vayu, his father, gets really upset, stops all the air in the universe. Everybody's choking. And they go to Vayu and say, please let the air out. And so he says, if you bring Hanuman back to consciousness, back to life. So the demigods surround Hanuman and they bring him back to life. At the same time, they give him so many benedictions and blessings and powers. And because of these benedictions, blessings, and powers, he's still very young, He becomes prideful and teases the sages in different ways. And the sages get so angry with him. Here's the whole history of Hanuman. And they get so angry that they curse him to forget his power until someone reminds him. So Hanuman's not aware of his full power. He knows he has some power, but it's not the full power. In other words, he doesn't know he can jump to Lanka when they get to the shore of the ocean. So eventually, one thing leads to another, and Jambavan reminds him, because Jambavan is, I guess we'll get to Jambavan in a while.
Yeah. H.
Yeah,
J.
J, that's J. But anyway, so Jambavan is, so we'll combine the two. Jambavan is a Chiranjiva. He lives basically for lifetime of Lord Brahma. He's Lord Brahma's son.
Yeah.
And so he's already seen these pastimes before. He knows I'm supposed to remind Hanuman it's time, to remember your powers. And Hanuman remembers his powers, crosses the ocean, tells Sita Devi what's happening. He gives Sita Devi Ram's message. Then he comes back and tells Ram he found Sita Devi. And he's very instrumental in building the bridge, very instrumental in killing the demons. And he always remains at the side of Lord Ram. And he was left on this earth when Lord Ram ended his pastimes. And he's continually chanting the Ramayana, chanting Lord Ram's name, and worshipping the deities of Sita and Ram in Kim Purusha Loka. He's sometimes depicted as a monkey, but he's actually a Kim Purusha, which is more like a hairy human being. You understand? Like sometimes depicted Neanderthals and people like that. So he has different characteristics. He has a tail, of course, and he has powers, of course, but he's not a monkey. Like Jambavan is not a bear. Jambavan is Riksharaj. He's the king of the bears because he had a daughter, Jambavati, and she certainly was not a bear, and Krishna's not going to marry a bear. You know, Krishna has enough discrimination not to marry a bear. Then you have little bear children, half bear children. So, anyway, so that's Hanuman in a nutshell. And then we have Indrajit, who is Ravana's son, actually Ravana's oldest son. And he we thought he almost defeated Rama and Lakshman several times. Ultimately was killed by Lakshman. And killed when Hanuman was part of that story because he was performing this sacrifice in order to get power, a chariot, and become invulnerable. And it's described in Valmiki Ramayana that Hanuman came in and passed urine on the sacrifice, destroyed the sanctity of the sacrifice, and then Lakshman was able to confront him and kill him. And Ram sent Indrajit back to his father with honor. Actually, it's described that Ram covered Indrajit with his own cloth to honor him, whereas the monkeys and everyone else wanted to defile his body and tear his body apart. So he was actually honored because he was loyal to his father. So he was honored very much. So that's Indrajit. Indrajit. It's called Indrajit because one time actually Ravan was captured by Indra, and then Indrajit, Meghnad was his name originally, because when he was born, he roared like a cloud, like a thunder cloud. And so then, ultimately, he saved his father, and therefore he was known as, and he captured Indra. He actually captured Indra, and the demigods had to come, and I think it was even Lord Brahma. Yeah, Lord Brahma had to come and say, please give us Indra back. So therefore he's called Indrajit. Yeah, so he conquered Indra. So that's Indrajit. And so the next one is Jambavan, who we already mentioned, who is the king of the bears, not a bear. And then we get to Janaka, who is the king of Mithila. And so Mithila is called Mithila for a particular purpose, and Janaka is called Janaka for a particular purpose because his ancestor was named Maharaj Nimi. Remember the story?
Yeah.
And Maharaj Nimi had some issue with his guru Maharaj, Vashishta Muni, because Maharaj Nimi wanted to do a sacrifice, and he wanted his guru to help with the sacrifice, and his guru wanted to go to the heavenly planets to get bigger, more donations from the demigods. So Nimi Maharaj decided that I'm going to do the sacrifice without Guru Maharaj. And some other brahmanas were there too. And so Nimi Maharaj did the sacrifice. It was like a chanting Hare Krishna sacrifice. His guru comes back, finds that he has done the sacrifice without his permission of Vashishta Muni. His guru curses him to become near Deha, without a body. And then he curses his guru. He says, this is my guru Dakshin. You become near Deha. And they both die right then. And of course his guru later comes from the semen of Mitra and Varuna, takes birth again. But Nimi is lying there while the Brahmins are performing the sacrifice. He's lying there in the vat, his body is there in a vat of oil to preserve the body till the end of the sacrifice. So at the end of the sacrifice that was being performed originally by him, the Brahmanas asked the demigods to bring Nimi back to life. So Nimi sits up out of the vat of oil, and he says, I don't want to be back to life. I was back to Krishna, back to home, back to God, and you want to bring me back to this miserable material world. Forget it, boys. And so he goes back into the oil, and the Brahmanas try to figure out how are you going to have the next king? Because Nimi didn't have any sons or any heir. So they basically used genetic engineering, and they churned or whatever. They got a son from Nimi's genes, and that son was called Janaka, Janaka the first. So it was just like we have in the UK, Queen Elizabeth the First, the Second, the Third, whatever. King Edward, King Henry the Eighth. Anyway, there's another story about him. So anyway, you heard of King Henry the Eighth before? Half of his wives he killed until he made it legal to have a divorce. So anyway, that's King Henry VIII. So anyway, so Janaka, there's Janaka the First, Second, Third, and which Janaka Sita's father was, I don't know. But basically, there was a drought in his kingdom. That's why he was called Janaka. And in order to alleviate that drought, the king had to go and plow the land himself. And he had like a golden point on the plow. And so as he was plowing, they hit a box, and guess who was inside? Sita. And also, Janaka was given this bow that could not be lifted by, it took like hundreds of men just to roll it on the ground. Isn't it? This bow of Lord Shiva. And so he was trying to figure out, how to arrange Sita's marriage. But then one day Sita, as a little girl, actually when she was playing with the ball, actually lifted up the bow with one hand. So he thought, well, she's really strong there, So she has to marry someone equally as strong. Someone who could lift the bow. And so, therefore, when Lord Ram came, in the Sita Swayamvara, and he lifted the bow, he not only lifted the bow and tried to string it, but the bow broke. The story is, in the Valmiki Ramayana, the bow broke, not because of Lord Ram, because the bow broke itself, because it didn't want to be used against Lord Ram in the battle.
Right.
Shiva's bow.
Yeah.
So the bow decided, I'm going to break. You understand?
Yeah.
That's an interesting story. So anyway, so that's Janaka. We're not even part of the way through this. It's time to end. So anyways, and tomorrow we get to Jataya. Started keeping with the Jayas right now.
Yeah.
I guess it's nice to go through this list.
Oh yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to find out about each character.
Yeah.
So anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So, Valmiki's spiritual master, they are Saptarishis or Narad Muni?
The Saptarishis were his initiating spiritual masters, but Narada Muni was his Siksha Guru,
Okay.
and Lord Brahma's there too.
Yeah.
So they're all the Siksha Gurus. So the Siksha Guru, Diksha Guru, those who initiated him in the mantra are considered the initiating Guru, and the mantra, of course, is Mara, which became Ram. Yeah, so Saptarishis. I'm not sure which one of them was officially. I mean, maybe you're only supposed to have one. So I'm sure one of them was the ones who gave him the mantra. It's not mentioned which one, but he was told to chant Mara, Mara, Mara. Nice story.
Yeah. And regarding the spiritual master of Nimi, he didn't go back to Godhead?
Who?
The spiritual master of Nimi, he didn't go back to Godhead? Like came back
He
to
stayed
God-
around for a long time, the Vishishta Muni.
Yeah.
He's
okay.
also Chiranjiva.
Okay.
He stays around. I mean, you hear about the Saptarishis through many different ages.
Yeah.
And even, I'm trying to remember if in the Mahabharata the Saptarishis are mentioned. Or Vashishta is mentioned. I think Vashishta is also mentioned in the Mahabharata too. So he's, eventually, I mean, he'll go back to God. He's a pure devotee. So is Vishwamitra Muni. They're both pure devotees. So interesting. Good question. Okay, who else has a question? Yeah.
Thanks for that class, Gurudev. You mentioned that the other Ramayans has aspects of Mayavadi philosophy.
Some other Ramayans. I'm not going to mention what
Yes,
Ramayans.
what were the aspects of that? Some examples.
I don't want to get into too many details because it get too specific. But really confusing the Jiva soul with Vishnu Tattva. Not knowing the difference between Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva. That's basically it. And anyway, that's Prabhupada's words. I'm not gonna, I'll get killed. Sometimes if I repeat Prabhupada's words in the wrong place, I get into trouble. Like one time I was giving a class and I repeated some of Prabhupada's words about Mahatma Gandhi, and I got in trouble. So I have to be careful. We're online. Someone will crucify me. We got 36 people watching, more than people in this room. And that's only on Zoom, also on YouTube and Facebook.
I think for locals as well, because we have given the information in our Auckland region as well.
Yeah.
So,
Everybody should understand why take chances. We should hear from those who we are sure about. If someone is questionable, we don't criticize them,
yes.
but we just want to be sure about those who we hear from. That they're following strictly, they have the right understanding of the philosophy. I mean, it's very dangerous. Even we have many Vaishnavas, different groups, and I'm not going to criticize anyone in particular, who basically try to propagate the higher aspects of devotional service, entering into one's rasa, siddha deha, something like that, or siddha pranali. And they may not have the adhikar for that, or they may be presenting it to people who are not ready for it. And in that case, we should avoid that sort of association too.
Yeah.
We have to be careful who we associate with, even amongst the devotees. Someone's following strictly, someone who's preaching according, understands the tattvas, and someone who's presenting things properly according to time, place, and circumstance, and according to their own adhikar, according to their own realization. Yeah. Like if I was going to say to Krishna Chandra, for example, that I just realized you're a gopi and your name is Krishna Chandranini. and your service is cooking sweet rice for Krishna in the spiritual world. So from now on, you meditate on that. That would call into question my authenticity or my own position.
Yeah.
Now, even if it was true that he was Krishna Chandranini, Dini or something like that, but if I have presented it inappropriately or publicly, let's say it was true, let's say I was properly realized, he was properly realized, but I made an announcement in class that he's an associate of Rupa Goswami, then that would be inappropriate, even if both things were true.
Yeah.
So you have to be really careful. Okay. What? Yeah.
We went to the Jambavan's Gufa.
Oh yes, it's cave.
The cave.
Did you see any of the bears there? Did you go in it or what?
Yeah, we went inside.
Is it scary?
It's dark inside.
Yeah.
It's big, but
Big.
inside is very narrow. You can't go inside.
Very narrow.
Yeah.
Okay. Jambavan. Okay. Any other questions?
One last one.
Yeah, one last question.
Okay, so when Ravana abducted Sita,
Yeah.
few religions they say, like Sri Sampradaya, they say that Sita was replaced.
Yes, that's
That
right.
was Maya. And few say no, that was a real Sita. So
Lord Chaitanya not only said, but he uncovered the Kurma Purana. This is stories in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it actually reveals it was Maya Sita, and the real Sita was kept by Agni, the fire god. So there's a whole story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he found a Brahmin that was lamenting. And this Brahmin was lamenting the Sita Devi, the goddess of fortune, Lord Ramchandra's wife. had been kidnapped by Ravan.
Yeah.
And so then later on, Lord Chaitanya found the Kurma Purana, had it copied, and gave a copy to the Brahmin, just to alleviate the distress that the Brahmin was experiencing. So yeah, that's the story, and even in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that's mentioned
Yeah.
about Mayasita. And this Mayasita, I don't want to get into the whole story, but this Mayasita became attracted to Lord Ram, but Lord Ram refused her because he had this Ekapatni Vrata vow. And later on, she got a chance to marry Lord Vishnu during the Venkateshwara story.
Padmavati.
Padmavati, yeah. She got a chance to marry. Yeah, she got a chance to marry, and Lakshmi got angry with her, and they both turned into deities. And anyway, I can't get into that story right now, but that's an interesting story. Lord Ram said, "Yes, in the future you'll be able to marry me," like he said to the sages in Dandakaranya.
Yeah.
In the future, you're going to become gopis. In the future, they're becoming gopis. But as Lord Ram, they only had one wife. He had one word, one wife, and one arrow. You know, so Ekeha Kuruvanandana. Like that. Okay, on that happy note, all glories to His Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada, we had a lot of people watching today. Wow.
Bir Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki
Srila Prabhupada, ki joy.